We've created, again, a resource page for the teachers to learn more about food security, vulnerability, and hazards. We've listed out some resources, and I'm going to just go over those quickly here in just a little bit. There are some classroom modules and case studies that are available, and we'll also go over those quickly. In the online tools section, there are some really neat tools that we were able to find. One, a Global Hunger Index, one, the FAO Global Livestock Production and Health Atlas, which has an interactive map, and also a Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction. Now, some of these, and then also ideas for youth exchange projects. So with that, what I would like to do at this time is to leave the PowerPoint and to go to our resource page. This is on the MyCOE site, and the address for this is www.aag.org/GCE Food Security. And the first section is the teaching and learning about food security, vulnerability, and hazards. And that section is posted with a list of resources that are online. Some of these are from the UN and the Committee on Food and Agriculture, as well as the USDA. Feed the Future is also a resource that comes out of the USDA. There are a lot of resources there. And then also the United Nations has additional resources on hazard management and disaster reduction. So teachers can use these resources primarily to kind of get up to speed with what are some of these issues. And as we're talking about these different topics, I guess I have one poll for you, and that is, I would be curious about whether you are currently teaching about food security in your classroom. So go ahead and vote on the poll. We have about half of you that have voted. Some quick answers coming in. A little more than half are saying that they are teaching about food security at this time. We're almost got everybody voted. Go ahead and send your response. Okay, and we have about 75% saying that yes, they do teach about food security. Now, sometimes if you may think that you don't teach about food security, but it's very closely connected to a lot of topics that you may be teaching about. If you're teaching about urbanization, the land use and change in land use, this could also be connected to food security in the way of changing agricultural land or arable land to urban development. You might also teach about food security when you teach about population issues. There are very strong connections there, and you would probably be able to make some other connections also just on the about I would say as you are teaching, you might think about economics, connections, networks, shipping, transportation. Any of those topics, if you're teaching about those even in an economics course, you may be able to easily connect in food security. So these are just some ideas about, you may think that you don't teach about food security, but if you're teaching about some of those other things, it can be very easily and quickly tied in to these other topics. Okay, and As we're going through this, now we're also looking at the some of the risk and hazard management resources. And I would like to find out how many of you teach about hazards in your classroom. So if you respond to the poll, oh, and it looks like, interestingly, hazards are taught more often than the food security issues. Okay, everybody's voted. So about 82% of you are saying that you teach about hazards. I know when I was teaching, my students were always interested in earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, anything with a lot of things blowing up, falling down, moving around. They were usually interested in that kind of thing. But then making connections even between what happens after the disaster. It just isn't about the disaster and where it happens, but then how do people manage? How do they adjust for risks? How do they try to mediate those risks with planning and preparedness? And in many cases also food and clean water become paramount after some kind of a disaster. So again, the connection between these things is easy to include. If you're already teaching about disasters or hazards, then you can probably also connect food security into that by talking about vulnerability also. So we do have some modules listed here that you may be interested in exploring. And again, these are just suggestions and ideas to get you thinking. Of course, a teacher always needs to modify them for their own site and situation. And then, like I said, I do have some online tools that I want to show you. The first one that I have right now is the International Food Policy Research Institute. This is an interesting interactive map that will let you get information. It's a global hunger index report. And interestingly, this shows this data over time. And I found that to be very interesting. Right now I have the Philippines up. We can go click on other locations. This should show us the data, I believe, for Ghana. And let's try Bolivia. There's Bolivia's data. Let's try Nicaragua. Oop, not quite. There we go. And so by clicking on the map, you can get data for some of these different world regions. And it will let students look at their own region in relation to others as well. This next map is a global livestock production and health atlas. And when it lets you choose different types of livestock, this particular map is showing us sheep density. But if we wanted to, we could also look at poultry. We could also look at pig or hog production, and we could look at cattle. And you can kind of get an idea of where a lot of cattle production is the density is happening. This data is 2005. And I would have to know more about the specifics of how they're processing the data, because some of the data up here in Canada is actually a little surprising to me on that one. But it does let you look at data from a different perspective and also at a global scale. Now, this next online resource that we have is